Fox 8 Sports. This is the Black and Gold Review Show, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers, home of the best-selling truck 41 years straight, and the 2018 Nissan Titan, backed by America's best limited truck warranty.
Welcome in, everyone, alongside the Hall of Famer from the Saints, Deuce McAllister, and everyone's Hall of Famer, West Bank's own Sean Bazan. I'm Juan PK. Welcome to the Black and Gold Review Show, first show of the season, and a big welcome back to football finally kicking off.
Definitely happy to have football back. I think for the guys, they're excited, they're ready to go, and they're happy to be hitting someone else as well.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt. And look, we get into that week-to-week grind. It's that part of the year where we kind of live week to week, and it really gets fun.
Not going to be any hitting on the set tonight, but we are going to get you right into the playbook. Our first play tonight, Peyton's approach to camp. He's a little more calmer, more trusting of his players. Am I the only one that's noticing that, Deuce?
No, I think he knows that he has a really good ball team. I think the approach for him is to get to that first game against Tampa Bay with everyone healthy. And he's done a pretty good job of trying to manage that roster. He'll give those guys veteran day off. For him, he wants them to be able to go out and execute and be ready for Tampa.
You said the key word, trust. He trusts this roster. Also, though it is a young team, there is plenty of veterans on this team that have provided a lot of leadership, and those players have kind of taken ownership a little bit. So I think it's a good mix right now for training camp.
But he still needs to see progression as you go forward here. In other words, if the approach he's taking now isn't working after game number 2 in the preseason, maybe it changes up a little bit?
Well, he doesn't mind changing it. I mean, you go back and you look at the first practice that they had outside of the walkthrough, it was tackling, and it was tackling for a reason.
All right, back into the playbook because we're going to talk about tackling 101. It is still a work in progress, Sean, this team tackling.
Interesting. It's a tough spot to be in. Do you go, full live, take your own players to the ground? They hadn't done that before the first preseason game. Obviously, that showed up on that first drive. But remember, Jacksonville is one of the most physical teams in the NFL, and from what I understand, they had the most padded practices in the NFL. So it's a tough matchup, and I think that showed up. But I'm okay with their approach right now because you just don't want to risk guys getting hurt in training camp against your own guys. So it's kind of a catch-22, but I think they're in a decent spot.
I think for me, it was 12 straight practices for Doug Marrone leading up to the Saints as far as what they went as far as shoulder pads are concerned. But for me, I agree a lot of ways. I mean, you want those guys to go out and compete. You want them to be able to come up and tackle. It's a want to as well. If you want to tackle, you're going to make the play.
All right, let's get back into the playbook for our talking point number 3. Going deep. We're not talking about stretching the field. We're talking about the depth in the roster here, maybe the best you've seen in a long time with this team, Deuce.
It's really interesting to look at this roster, because some guys that made this team last year will not be with this team. I think we've already seen it with Aggie Davis being released already. But he won't be the only person that made this team last year that will get released. And I think that just speaks of the young depth that they have on this roster.
I can't recall a single training camp where there's not a single unknown as a starter right now. Look at it 1 through 22 on offense and defense. You can pretty much pencil in a guy as a starter. Now, some reserves can be debated, but for right now, I can't remember the last time there was this many starters pretty much already penciled in.
We're talking about depth, and when you think about depth, you're always thinking about, well, maybe it's the veteran players behind veteran players, but you got some young players here, Traquan Smith. He's going to make this team, obviously. Boston Scott, you don't know what's going to happen to him. Might this be the year where every draft pick makes this football team, or do you see somebody getting left out?
You can see someone get left out just because maybe a veteran steps up at a certain position. And then also I think that you have to understand and realize injuries will play a part of who makes this roster at some point. You may be a little thin at the tight end position. They may be a little thin at maybe the linebacker position. So you may carry a player or two that a draft pick wasn't in that room, so to speak. So injuries will play a factor, but then maybe a veteran steps up that's not on this roster yet.
I could see 2 or maybe even 3 draft picks not making the final roster, maybe head towards the practice squad just because of the numbers that they have at certain positions. So, yeah, I don't think it's a guarantee at all that all the draft picks make this roster this year.
All right, playbook number 4, because we're talking about the running back position. There are so many guys that are competing for Mark Ingram's carries he's not going to be given this team. So replacing Mark Ingram, how does this happen? Is it by committee? We know Alvin Kamara is set there, but the guys behind him is a big, big unknown right now.
Well, you have Kamara, obviously, and then you have a guy like Jonathan Williams, who I thought had a really good game and had a really good couple of practices. I think We're all seeing kind of the type of player that he is when the pads come on. He can show that physicality. You have Terrence West. You have Shane Vereen. You have, Boston Scott. So, look, I think right now Williams has kind of made the best first impression, as our graphic says right there. But I think as the preseason goes on, that'll hopefully get clearer for Sean Payton, because that's an important role for the first 4 games of the season. You got to kind of maintain status quo. I'm curious to see who that player is going to be. And
I think it'll be by committee as well. I think that they're really looking or depending on 2 players. If one can handle it, then maybe that opens up another roster spot. But right now, I think it'll be 2 players, and I think I agree. If I had a guess, I would probably say Jonathan Williams has taken the first step, but I do like Shane Vereen being a veteran, and then I also like Terrence West being a veteran as well.
Do you like the way that Payton took the approach on this one, saying, you know what, I'm not going to rely so much on the younger players I have on the roster right now. I got to go out and find a guy that's identical to Ingram in that he's a veteran football player. He's been in the wars. He knows what it's like. He knows what it takes, as opposed to relying on someone young. Are you surprised by that approach?
You got to protect number 9.
Yeah.
And so if you can't protect number 9, then you're going to put yourself in a bad situation. So you're not necessarily surprised by it.
And the 2 guys I think right now in the lead, as you mentioned, Williams and Vereen, both of those guys, Sean Payton and Drew Brees both said they can pick up in pass protection. That is crucial in this offense.
All right, so we're talking about guys that can pick up things. How about guys that can pick balls out of the air? Our 5th play in the playbook, Michael's maturation, Michael Thomas. We haven't talked about him a lot in training camp because he's continued to be what Michael Thomas has always been since he's been here. Great player.
Michael Thomas, to me, was the star of the offseason before training camp back in late May and early June. And to me, he's been one of the stars of training camp so far. And it's not like he's going up against second and third teamers. He's beaten Marshawn Lattimore a lot. Michael Thomas had a great first 2 years in the league. I mean, the sky's the limit for him. He can ascend to top 2, top 3 in the NFL in that wide receiver position.
What's interesting when you watch him is you're looking for him to take a step back. And he hadn't done it yet. And so he continues to work, and his route tree is continuing to expand as well. And I think that's what people are going to see. He is getting the ball more vertical, which is something that is going to only help him as far as yards per catch is concerned.
You always see these lists about if you had to pick 5 receivers, who would you take? And it seems to me that maybe it's just early in the game with his career, but he's not a guy being mentioned up there with the best receivers in the league. Maybe he should be. Maybe that's a little bit of motivation for him?
Well, I think it's motivation for him, but I think one of the things is when you have the plus 40, the plus 50 catches as far as yards per catch and turn those into touchdowns, that's where it's really important for him. I mean, yes, the slant, he can catch it. Yes, the screen, the hitch, he catches a lot of balls like that. But when he can go vertical, that's when I think people around the league will start to respect him.
Is that the one thing his game is missing?
Give it one more year, I think. He's one of the most physical receivers in the NFL right now. Give it this year. By the end of this year, he puts up numbers like he put in last year. They're going to be talking about him not just here in New Orleans, but around the entire NFL.
All right, coming up, Taysom Hill gets mixed reviews on his Saints preseason debut. Find out how the second-year quarterback needs to harness his running as Sean Van breaks down the film. And should Drew Brees play at all this preseason? We'll debate your questions next.
Watching the Black and Gold Review Show, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers and the 2018 Nissan Titan.
All right, welcome back into the Black and Gold Review Show. We broke down the playbook with Deuce and Sean last segment, but now the second part of the show, we let Sean break down some tape on Taysom Hill.
Yes, Taysom Hill. He's a guy, I once called him the most interesting man on the Saints roster. So much intrigue and curiosity surrounding Taysom Hill. We finally got to see him in a game as a quarterback. In 26 snaps of work, the tape on Taysom revealed a lot. In this installment, we're focusing on his ability to make plays with his feet. When it comes to Taysom Hill running, it's not a matter of can he or can't he run. It's a matter of should he or shouldn't he run. Hill finished the game with 7 carries for 52 yards and a touchdown. 2 of those 7 were by design, and they were his 2 best. The first came on a zone read where the entire Jaguars defense crashed down, and Hill was able to gain 21 yards. The second was another zone read play. Once again, the end crashed in, but this time, Hill had to take on an unblocked defender and outmuscle him into the end zone. On the other 5 runs, 1 was a kneel and 2 were the correct call to take off. His first one was the perfect example. Hill takes the bootleg, but Deion Yeller gets knocked off his route and never gets into the flat. Traquan Smith is covered, and with no receiver open, Hill keeps it and gains 7 yards and a first down. Later, with Hill in the shotgun, he looks to his left, takes a quick step to elude the pass rusher, keeps his eyes up, and when he can't find an open receiver, he takes advantage of the open space to gain 12, another first down. But on 2 instances, he made the wrong choice to run. Still in the third quarter, Hill is blitzed. The line does a decent job of picking it up, but as he steps up in the pocket, he drops his eyes a little too soon and runs for 2 yards. Had he kept his eyes up just a count longer, Traquan Smith is open for an easy throw and completion. Later in the fourth quarter, Hill once again executes the bootleg. He sees the lane and runs for 8 yards. Solid gain, but when watching the play again, Hill actually should have thrown it to Josh Huff, his first read, who was uncovered. Now, there is a risk you run when you run, and that's durability. Your quarterback takes more hits. Hill had injury history at BYU, and even on this touchdown run, he took a big hit on that throwing shoulder. Still, it is a part of his game that coaches would be foolish to not utilize and Deuce, I know you and I were talking in the film room earlier. That last play could have been a mix-up, a route combination kind of mix-up.
Yeah, I think it was a route combination mix-up. I mean, because when you pull it back and go and look, it is a bootleg. It is one of the traditional bootlegs that they ran earlier. Yelder does get picked off, but I think that Huff may have ran the wrong route because when you turn and you look, Hill never gets his eyes around. I mean, because if he's expecting him to be in the flat, he would have let it go. So I think it was probably a mix-up on that route.
Let's say Taysom Hill gets the opportunity to quarterback this team 2 years from now. How much do you have to change the offense to fit him?
Well, I think you tailor it to his capabilities. I think for him, you know, he loves to throw as far as on the move. So for me, I'm moving him a lot. You know, I'm running some read option. I'm keeping him in the pocket as far as to run some read options, and you know, whether it's a slant, whether it's a post, those are the type of things that's almost like 1-2 rhythm throws for him, and those are the things that he can excel at.
All right, let's get you to some questions because that's what we do on this show. You know that. Submitted on the Final Play app using the Final Word feature from Frederick Brown in Wisner, Louisiana. He asks, do you think that Taysom Hill will beat out Tom Savage for the backup quarterback job? It's still very early, but what do you think?
I still think Savage is in the lead, but I got to be honest, I wish I could have included this in the entire film study, but it would have been like a 5-minute film study. I was pleasantly surprised when I went back and watched the tape of Hill in the pocket. Look at that throw right there. That's a nice throw. There was 2 throws like that where he hit over the middle, one to Traquan Smith and one to Josh Huff. Here's what it boils down to, and Deuce, you alluded to this. With Tom Savage, you don't necessarily have to change what you do. He can execute the offense, but I think he's probably reached his max as a player. But in Hill's case, there's a little bit of an unknown. You change what you do, add a little more RPO, a little more bootleg. Is that more successful than Tom Savage executing the offense? Hopefully it's a question they never have to answer. But right now I would put Savage ahead, but I think Hill is getting more and more comfortable. We'll see over the preseason.
Sean, I agree. Right now I would put Savage ahead, and it's for, you know, when you talk about Taysom Hill as a quarterback, he has to continue to feel confident, be able to throw the football. I mean, a lot of times when he misses on a throw, it's because of his footwork. If he can continue to practice on his footwork, continue to see the looks that defenses are giving him, I think the comfort level will come.
I think people ask me a lot of times that when Breeze leaves, does Peyton leave? But how much do you think maybe Peyton might be intrigued by this different kind of quarterback to kind of see what he can do with him?
Well, I think he's intrigued by the different quarterback, but I also think the different style of quarterback, but I also think the team overall. He knows he has a good young team, and I think that matters as well. And if they can compete while he still has that young team, then I don't think he goes anywhere.
Yeah. I agree.
That's pretty simple. Let's get to another question. This one, Jay Champagne in Bell Chase. Do you think the Saints should sit Drew Brees all season long? I do. What do you think?
Preseason.
Preseason. All preseason long.
I don't want to sit him all preseason long. I want him to get at least a quarter, you know, maybe 2 series, somewhere in there. Whether it's that 3rd game, I'm fine with that. And then he has about 10 days to get ready for Tampa Bay. But I would love to see him at least have 1 series, maybe 2 series. It'll be good practice against the Chargers, those 2 games. So if he doesn't play against San Diego, I'm okay with that because they'll have 2 good days of practice.
He didn't play to the 3rd game last year.
Yeah, he told me last year that he prefers those joint practices. He says he gets more out of those. So if he has that in the 3rd preseason game, I'm okay with that. I don't see why you even need him in the second game. Also, you know, with Taysom Hill, maybe have him run with the ones this week since you had Savage do it last week. So I don't necessarily need to see a lot of them. I'd like to see him get that third preseason game, a quarter, a half, plus those joint practices. Now it'll be good.
How much do you think in the back of the minds of Sean Payton and Mickey Loomis, they're saying, you know what, let's schedule some joint practices because this can save our veteran players from having to play second or third preseason games? Because as he said, Breeze feels like he gets more out of the joint practices.
It's probably more of the look that the other team has, and then you're practicing against a pretty good team. You look at that front four that San Diego has, that's probably one of the top in the NFL. And so your tackles, Armstead and Ramczyk, they're going to get challenged. Yeah. And so to get that look against a 3-4 team that can be a very good 4-3 team, I think that bodes well to get that practice in.
You can manage the situation, you know, 2-minute drill, no huddle, whatever. You may not have that in a third preseason game or even fourth preseason game. You can manage the situation and it can be a little bit more controlled than, say, in a game.
Okay, all right, still to come. How do Mark Ingram's teammates feel about the looming suspension? That's just one of your questions we're answering as the Black and Gold Review rolls on. Stay with us.
You're watching the Black and Gold Review Show, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers and the 2018 Nissan Titan.
All right, welcome back in, and we'll get you back to your questions. We appreciate you going on the Final Play app to send us your questions. This one coming from Fred in Metairie. He asked the question, do players and coaches regret when a teammate puts himself in a position to get suspended by the league? And Deuce, as a former player, I posed that question to you first. I'm sure you've been around it before.
I've been around it, but I don't know if the players necessarily regret it. You feel bad for the team as well as the player. But the mentality has always been next man up. So I think that's the main mentality. Now, if you're in a playoff stretch or you're in a run to qualify for the playoffs, that makes it a little tougher. But I think the mentality is, hey, look, I'm not going to feel sorry for this guy. I got to do my job.
And they had plenty of time to prepare for it. They've known about this for a couple of months now. Sean Payton is a good enough offensive coordinator. The Saints have enough talent to survive the first 4 games without Mark Ingram. Obviously, you'd rather have him, but I think you can survive the first quarter of the season without him. So I haven't picked up on that at all. I think the teammates they're kind of rallying behind him a little bit, showing him some support, and, hey, we'll keep the seat warm, ready for you whenever you come back. But I think the Saints will be okay.
What if you get really good production out of the guys that take his place? What kind of decision you got to make then?
A Wally Pipp moment, that's what you're referencing? No, I think he would still come in. He may not get the same amount of touches, but I think that he would still come in and get touches.
But in terms of it being his contract year, Sean?
I think that's what this whole suspension hurts him the most, is in that his own wallet. The contract year, he's not going to have as many, have as good of stats now. So, like I said, though, I think the Saints will be okay. They'll survive without him.
Get to another question. This one coming from all the way down in Houma from Dion, targeting Michael Thomas so much. Do you think Dez Bryant will be a great addition? If he picks up the phone for Cleveland, he may go there, but he could play well here. Anybody can play well with Drew Brees throwing the ball to you, but is he a guy that you'd want here?
No. No. I just don't think A, the wide receiver room's pretty deep right now. B, he's got a stigma attached to him. He's got players that love him, got players that can't stand him. This locker room is really good right now. I don't see why there would even be a need.
This was a move that they could have made weeks ago. It's not something that they're necessarily interested in. They've signed Cam Meredith. They have Traquan. I don't know if there's enough footballs to go around if you do sign Dez Bryant.
He may mess up the chemistry in that locker room too, wouldn't he?
Well, I'm not going to talk bad about him.
Okay.
But it would
go based on history.
Yeah, based on history, it would be a difficult situation in that locker room. If he's just about winning and okay with getting 0 targets a few games, then yes. But I don't think that's what Dez wants to prove. I think he's out to prove that he is a 1,000-yard receiver. He wants to catch X amount of balls, and I just don't know if he can do that with this team.
All right, we're going to change positions now. The Saints have invested heavily in their linebacker core the last 2 years. How good can they be? In the meantime, head over to our Final Play app and check out Sean's After Further Review blog, where he projects his 53-man roster. That, as well as Sean's daily reports from camp, they're all on the Final Play app. Stay with us.
You're watching the Black and Gold Review Show, sponsored by your Southern Quality Ford dealers and the 2018 Nissan Titan.
All All right, welcome back in. We have time for one more question, and we saved Donald Woods Jr. for last. He's in New Orleans, and he wants to know, what is your biggest take on Demario Davis, A.J. Klein, and Alex Anzalone? How good is Mike Nolan as a linebackers coach?
Versatility. When I look at those linebackers, I think their ability to play multiple positions is very, very important. A couple of those guys have been banged up with injuries, so I think that's key. When you talk about Mike Nolan, he's a former head coach. He's been around some great linebackers. His ability to be not only a verbal communicator, but for him to be able to visualize as far as for players to be able to see it, I think that helps because he has the ability to be a different style coach for different players.
I think this set of linebackers is as good in pass coverage as we've seen in quite some time. And those three right there, Anzalone at the wheel, Davis at the mic, and A.J. Klein at the Sam. To me, that's going to end up being your starters in that base personnel. But they can do a lot of different things, and like I said, they have a lot of range, especially Anzalone and Davis in coverage. You can do a lot of things with your defense. We have linebackers that can do that.
Got a lot of veteran players in that position. Give me the one guy that does not make the cut because there's so many numbers there. Linebacker.
To be determined.
Yeah, look, I know Jaron Elliott had a nice game against the Jacksonville Jaguars, but I still don't have him on my roster yet. I like those top six, even with Stupar, Te'o, and Robertson at the end.
It's a great group to watch. Our Saints coverage will continue all week long leading up to Friday's second preseason game against the Cardinals on Friday. Again, that game will be preceded by our pregame show at 6:30. Former Saint Pat Swilling will be on board with me on that. The game kicks off at 7 and will be followed by a postgame show. All of that broadcast live right here on Fox 8. In the meantime, fantasy football drafts are coming up, and our Chris Hagan has plenty of thoughts on which guys need to be on your roster. Check out his Extra Point blog for all of your fantasy football analysis and advice. It's on the Final Play app as well. Until then, for Deuce and Sean and everyone here at Fox 8, I'm Juan Kincaid. Thanks for watching. Our next newscast is at 4:30 in the morning. Have a good night.